Okay. Thank you so much for listening to this replay. If you weren't able to join us on the call. Um, so today, I want us to really think about that we're creating joyful and sacred holidays and holy days with family, friends, and acquaintances. Obviously, this is our goal. And I am Raelee Peirce, certified family coach, and I am mom of two teens. And I have my background is a bachelor's in communication studies from UNC. I've been a coach since '99, and my passion is working with families, helping them simplify, helping you to discipline with connection and not control. And I'm informed, a lot of my work is informed by the Baha'i faith, as well as Waldorf education and developmental psychologists, Dr. Gordon Neufeld, family therapist Kim John Payne. Welcome. So in terms of, our primary focus, again, is this holiday season is to nourish the human spirit and the well-being of our family. And I really, in developing this class today, I was really thinking more about that and the fact that, holidays, they're a time off from work and school life, and they do provide us this opportunity to slow down if we take it. I think we have decided not to in our culture really focus on slowing down, right? Holidays have become very stressful, but if we want to rethink them and really put more intention behind them, we can renew ourselves through rest and good food and time with our loved ones when we are able to be near them. If we have extended family, we also can connect with people who we may be new in an area and not have our loved ones around. So having the opportunity to invite others who may be, feeling a bit isolated or lonely, it's a great time to connect with people and make them feel, nourished and renewed in this way that you are striving for. So we know that for many families, the holidays really have become the opposite of nourishing. They're stressful, they're overscheduled, they even create financial anxiety. So that's why we're looking at a different way forward. So let's just consider in this hour together how we can reset our expectations and create a holiday season that's joyful, sacred, nourishing, and orienting for our child. So we're going to look at, I want you to keep in mind some key elements that can keep your celebrations simple but joyful, and nourishing and sacred. These elements would be, think about including more time in nature, and for all of you with little children, a lot more time for play, and healthy meals and treats, right? So putting more intention about what we're actually putting into our bodies, because we can really trash our bodies during the holiday season. And it starts with Halloween, and it's such a struggle, right? Because everything is so amazing and fun and entertaining in terms of food. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So nature, time for play, healthy meals and treats, and creating a cozy environment with things like candles and twinkly lights. So I'm going to break down the steps for you so you can get a full picture of bringing these kinds of elements into your holidays and holy days, whatever that looks like for you. And we're also going to take a look again. If you were with me last month, I have this image that I'm going to show you again about your family culture and how and where the holiday and holy days fit in and why they're so important actually to your child's identity. All right, so we had this image last time. Your family culture is this container, right? That it's creating this space that's safe where your child can grow and develop. These are the different points that we're focusing on to help us organize our thoughts around, this map that we are creating for our family. And we are answering, or we're carrying a question for our child until they can take that question up for themselves. That question is, who am I? Right? So we're answering that for them until they can answer that for themselves. A lot of times, especially in North America, we think that that question is something a child can carry for themselves from the beginning. And that actually is where we, in some ways, fall off the rails a little bit. Children are not, they don't come fully informed about the world. They don't come fully informed about identity and these big questions. And that's why their precious being has been given to you, is because with your experience and with your maturity and responsibility and all of these wonderful things that you've been entrusted with, you are carrying that question for them. So I think that's important because a lot of times we want our children to kind of grow up and create their own identity, and we kind of stay back, right? We're like, well, I'm going to let my kid figure out that big question, or they'll define what they want to do. That's really too big and too much for our child. So what we want to do is understand that all of our work in creating our container is really securing for them. So the whole idea is what we choose to celebrate and put effort toward is really identity building. So this is why this is actually important. I think we're like, oh, we're going to celebrate that. It sounds fun. And so we put our attention to something. And so it really becomes a big impulse or a really big gesture for our child, and a big memory for them. And maybe we didn't really intend for that particular holiday to stand out for them so much. We were like, oh, wow, I really kind of missed out on the other holiday or holy day that I would have rather that had some meaning to us, but it fell by the wayside. So really thinking about the intention behind your celebrations. So your child's connection to a holiday or a holy day, this is falling under one of those foundational points in the culture, family culture. It's in that rhythm culture. So we have daily rhythms, we have weekly rhythms, and we have yearly rhythms. And these yearly rhythms are meant to kind of allow us the space and time to gather together, to acknowledge what is sacred to us, acknowledge what we find. We're highlighting this as something that this is important, guys. We're going to pause, and we're going to actually embrace this particular holiday or holy day. And it really is about how our family works together through that, how we prepare together, and then how we celebrate together. That's how we're connecting to the holy day or the holiday. These 2 points, right? These 2 foundational points, we're touching in both of them. And we know that these are the grounding, sturdy thighs of our family. So we're not fooling around when we celebrate together. The most deeply understood and meaningful events are those that we create tradition and ritual around in our own homes. So, we might do different things in the community based on what the community is offering. We might do something different, but what we do in our own home should be something that is traditional and ritual, in that sense of like every time that holiday or that holy day comes around, that kids would immediately say, oh, yes, this is one of my favorite holidays or holy days, because we always did, or we always ate, or we always put out XYZ. So if you change it up every year in what you do in your own home, that is actually going to, it's fine. But what it does is it really weakens the memory and the importance and the actual sacredness of the holy day or the holiday, because it doesn't land on us the same way as human beings. For us to find sacredness and meaning in something, it has this lasting effect because of the predictability of how we celebrate or commemorate or anything that puts a highlight on something. This really allows our children to live into that and understand it. When we do something completely different every year and we change it up and we shake it up and there's no rhyme or reason, different foods every year and different decorations, and we're just kind of all over the place. Really what happens is that the child really has no comprehension of what they're celebrating, why. They can't remember the reason of the holiday. And this is why it's really hard to not fall into the trap of just celebrating what the greater culture is doing. We may have those holidays are part of what we want to celebrate in the greater culture, and we may have other holidays that we would rather, other holy days that we would rather do, or in addition to those cultural things. But what ends up happening in the end is our childhood can become really, our identity can be wrapped up more in the cultural rituals and traditions than what we did in our own home, if we're not putting more intention towards what we want to stand out for our children. So it's the predictable rituals that you set in your own home that gives your child a very powerful identity forming gift. And that gift is the gift of, it's coming, the gift of anticipation. Okay, so you might be thinking, wait, how does anticipation add up to be the most powerful identity building part of the holiday? Well, when we actually have time to create these family rituals and this predictability around the event, our child builds a deeper identity and connection with the event. So it's in the preparation before it even happens, right? So before the holiday has even happened, it's in our preparation and our build up of waiting for that and talking about it and preparing for it, that it becomes a part of how they identify in the world. Like, oh yeah, we're getting ready for this. And I'm so excited because every year this is what we do. And it might be the most simple thing that you do when the actual holiday arrives, but the buildup, the storytelling perhaps beforehand, or the decorations that you are putting out, and the baking, the particular baking that particular holy day you've chosen that food or that that kind of gift that you give to people that you love. Like you can be very creative with how you're preparing for this particular holy day or holiday. And that buildup is this anticipation. And that is why you want to lean into rituals and tradition that nourish and heal rather than simply just entertain and overwhelm us. You know, it'd be better to choose some very simple ways of preparation and not try to overwhelm yourself financially or even go overboard with decor. We're going to talk a little bit more about those elements. But if we understand how we can go about actually establishing our footing about what are we trying to do? What is this? There's actually a really sweet joy about waiting and getting ready for something. Kim John Payne says that unscheduled time builds depth layers of meaning and feeling around activities. It's really beautiful. Unscheduled time builds depth layers of meaning and feeling around activities. So meaning that you don't always have to have events that you're attending. It's more about like in that unscheduled time, waiting before something is about to happen, that there's this feeling, right, of anticipation because you're able to enjoy the candles that you've put together that are specific for this holy day, or you've been baking and there's smells in the air that you never smell any other time but now. And these can be connected to people in our lives. We have memories that are associated maybe with a grandparent who we always, we always did this together. We always baked this in preparation for this specific event. So too many scheduled activities actually backfires. I think so many times there's so many wonderful things that we could be doing if it's a cultural holiday, especially because, of course, there's going to be more things that are about that cultural holiday. And we can go to so many things that, oh, let's go here. That sounds so cute. And oh, let's do this. That'll be really fun. But what happens is if we actually have too many scheduled activities around that particular holy day or holiday, it can create a very high bar, a high expectation level. And when you actually just want to pull back and give your child the opportunity to look forward to the holiday, they're kind of just like, what are we doing? Like, this is so boring, like just taking a walk because they've gotten so used to like the go, go, go. And like, I want to go and do this. And this looks really fun. But more than that, when we give children time, the actual space and time to anticipate something coming, we're actually strengthening their will and their identity. So that's that's such a huge part of understanding, like, oh wow, I'm doing more than just giving my child the chance to kind of anticipate this. I'm also helping them develop, it's not instant gratification, right? It's like, well, you can't open that until XYZ, like you can't open that till your birthday, or right, that's the night that we actually eat that special food and we're going to prepare it, or that's the day that we're going to deliver everything to our friends, right? So these special things and having to wait for that particular time, and that this is what we do first and then we do this, that this is really what helping them also to fully understand what they're celebrating, why, and what makes it special. So children who have time to anticipate the upcoming activity, they actually bring their imagination to that. And anticipation, regardless if it's a holiday or a holy day, like if it's a vacation or an upcoming camping trip or anything that they can look forward to, they're actually bringing their own imagination to it, thinking, oh, I think I can see us around the campfire roasting marshmallows. That's going to be so fun. And we're going to, oh, yeah. And for this holiday, remember, we always frost cookies. And I love the cookie cutters, and we always sprinkle them. Like, so they're bringing their imagination of what it will be. And it's okay if it's not exactly that way. But the fact that they're bringing their own thoughts and hopes into the preparation and the planning, that you're actually now, you've moved from just an event that they go to. Now you've created an experience, and it's not just a one-time thing. It's like the whole leading up to it has become part of the event, which is really powerful. So anticipation builds a child's inner life. And when you're building that inner life of that will and that, that whole, like, I'm not just instantly gratifying my child. Now you're really building this other part of who they're becoming. And that's amazing, right? All right, so let's move into what is it that we're doing with our home environment for holy days and holidays? Like, how can we make that sacred, nourishing, joyful? Those are our ideas that we want to focus on. So the key here is that we have been fed the idea that more is better, the more entertaining, the more like busy and kind of just overwhelming, that the more fun something will be. And of course, I'm engaging you in an experiment, if you will, of how we might look at creating these nourishing holidays and these sacred holidays and holy days by thinking about creating, the anticipation and the preparation and putting intention around that. And then Now I'm inviting you to think about not creating an overwhelming and stressful environment, but rather let's start our journey of creating simple and meaningful home environments. And of course, the decor is part of that. So before you bring out all the decorations, what I suggest is like first do, if you can, if you have the time, do a deep clean of of the space that you are thinking of decorating. And that will really help clear away some of the clutter so that you can make room for whatever you're going to be putting up. Because if it goes on layers of kind of like papers and things, it just kind of feels a little messy and overwhelming. And the human being does better in simple, very clean spaces that are orderly and organized. So start with a clean space, remove toys. I recommend, especially if you're going to, not all toys, I'm going to finish that sentence, but just in terms of noise reduction, I want you to think about in a calming environment that we're going to remove like noisy, irritating toys because sometimes holidays might be also over an extended period of time when you're going to be all together under one roof, cooking and getting ready for something. And you want to experience that time as calming and nourishing and renewing as possible. So before you're going to be in that space together, if you can, remove things that are just really taxing on your nerves, like toys that beep and things. um, Essentially, decorations, they don't need to be elaborate. And I'm going to tell you a secret. They really don't need to be that different from each celebration if you really want to be, if you really want to simplify. So, you want to think in terms of environment. We want to create this cozy, calming space. And we all really, I know so many of us really love like scented candles. But what I've learned is that it can be actually really overwhelming to have scented candles. I mean, this is kind of a funny thing because I think we're kind of obsessed with scented candles. But for children, they're actually very easily sensitive to lighting, and we all are. But I want you to think about they have little bodies, babies and toddlers and preschoolers and kindergartners and little elementary children. They have little bodies, and we want to keep this calm environment. And part of that would even be what they're smelling. So just be sensitive and think about unscented candles. Think about like beeswax candles might be best. And just like some twinkly lights for softer lighting. And instead of thinking you have to change out the decor like in such a huge way for every holiday or holy day, you can actually let like that could be candles and twinkly lights could kind of come out for each holiday. That could be your base lighting. And instead of other things that maybe, I don't know what people really, I'm not quite sure, like, but there's a lot of stuff, right? You can go to Walmart right now and pick up a lot of decor for whatever's coming. But let flowers or greenery, they can actually distinguish the seasons that the holiday falls in. So like fall leaf garlands, and if you have a holiday that's coming up that would be in the fall, it could be leaf garlands and your candles and your twinkly lights. And then you've got your winter evergreens and pine cones and berries in the winter months. And then in the spring, it might be something like pussy willows and tulips. And then any summer holy days, it might be summer lavender and seashells. So thinking like just seasonally can be, and making it more nature-based than something that would be from the store, can be much more calming to the senses and very beautiful. I would suggest that in the daytime, try to use as much natural light as possible. And if the weather's nice, you can open up the windows depending on the season. Now, during special holidays, you might set up like something like this tent that you see. I love this, so cozy, right? So depending on the holy day or holiday, you might say, oh, this is the time of year when we set up our tent. It may be something that's such a favorite that it comes out a couple of times a year, depending on the holiday or the holy day. And it just is this really cute, sweet setup with twinkly lights and pillows and blankets. And it can be a refuge, for the kids to work on puzzles, or they read in there. You might have storytelling at night right before bed in the tent about the event that's coming up, about the holiday, or the holy day, so that you can, every year they know they're going to hear the stories about that particular event in the tent. That's super fun. Another thing to consider, like in terms of creating ambiance and like a really beautiful aesthetic, could be a special dinner that you always have on that particular holy day or holiday that's completely in candlelight, very magical. And I think that's what we're going for, right? There's a comfort with the idea of creating really beautiful and calming and nourishing holidays and holy days that they're magical. That's what we want to capture. Another aspect we need to consider is, of course, the part of the environment that we're creating may include what we choose to gift our children with for their birthday or a particular gift-giving holiday. So I want you to consider, this is interesting research that we can keep in mind as we think about purchasing or what we want to give our children. So this is actually from Josh Becker. He is a blogger or article writer from Becoming Minimalist. And he says recently reported that a new study published in the Journal of Infant Behavior and Development shows that young children who play in environments with fewer toys tend to display sustained levels of attention, increased imagination, perception, cognition, and motor coordination. Fewer toys may allow for deeper, sophisticated play because of the opportunity to become creative with each object in the environment. So I really love this thought, in connection to that. Tracy, she's a blogger at raisedgood.com. She says, let's focus on quality over quantity. Let's put more meaning behind each gift, and let's give experiences rather than things. Let's find open-ended toys for our children that encourage creativity, that foster free play, that captivate our children's imagination well beyond the holidays. And of course, Kim Payne, he says that the purpose of toys is to help our children create new worlds. So we want to think, when we go to purchase something, is this going to really open up my child's play? Is this going to allow them to go deeply into play? And usually more open-ended things help with that. We want our kids to live deeply and repeatedly in the now of a story or in play or in what they're creating on a canvas, rather than always eyeing what's next, right? We don't want them to get something and then they've barely even put that together and they're like, oh, and the next time I want to get this set. You can probably imagine what toys do that, right? So those may not be the best toys if we're just constantly becoming consumers rather than creators with our play. All right, so we've talked about the environment and creating that calming environment and how we might include gifts and what that might look like. Now let's move into rhythm. So we know, we've talked in the past how important rhythm is to our child's behavior. The more predictable we can be, the more our child, it feels secure and happy because they know it's coming. So given that, you guessed it, we need to maintain rhythm, but because it's a holiday, right, and a holy day time, we know that that's really challenging to do because it's just, everything's kind of topsy-turvy. So we might have a late event that we have to go to in the evening time, which really throws off bedtime. So if we can, what we would want to do is really strive to maintain our steady rhythms. But this boils down to three things with young kids. focus on healthy food during the time that you are together and celebrating. If you can pull in people who are cooking with you and things, like having a conversation like, yeah, we love having that particular dessert. So let's make sure that, we're gonna have some sustenance, like we're gonna have some vegetables and some protein or whatever it is, that we can fill our bellies, and then we get this wonderful dessert. Emphasizing that this other interesting, very fascinating idea behind creating simplicity is that we actually, one of the best ways to start simplifying is to make an agreement. It might just be right now with your partner, your parenting partner, but to agree that you're going to be courteous to each other. Like in your communication, like having a foundation of courtesy. Courtesy is actually something that we tend to lack when we're with people that we feel very comfortable with, and we can easily fall apart around. Sometimes courtesy can go out the window, but courtesy is something that we would want to really work on, especially in the holidays and holy days, and like going into it knowing like there may be some pretty stressful moments during this holiday time. Given that we can't completely control the sugar levels sometimes, or we can't control the schedule, and so we get kind of scary, right? So we're trying to de-escalate everything by bringing in this calm, sacred, nourishing experience. But we know that we don't always have that complete control when we go to other people's homes or when we go to our family. But we can control how we treat each other and how we talk with each other. So, and getting enough sleep. So these are three things that are really like can help us to meet our goals. If you have multiple days off, during this particular holiday or holy day, the best thing you can do is actually meal plan. And I know that it can be easier to keep kids like completely out of the kitchen, but they're actually more likely to eat and try new foods if they're part of the preparation of the food. So, kids can like rip lettuce. They can use little preschool choppers with chopping boards. You can look that up. Those are great Montessori things and Waldorf tools for kids. And they actually love to be part of something if we invite them, especially the younger they are. They like to help, usually around the 3, 4, and 5 years old. If they've never done it before and we've never invited them into that space, the older they get, the more difficult it is for them to see themselves doing that. They want to play rather than help you. So I always say, oh, earlier the better. So during, a holiday, you can make the preparation part of connecting with your family. Something that my kids really loved to do was to play restaurant. And so they would create the menu and they would draw the menu when they weren't quite ready to write and read yet. And then everyone would sit at the meal, all the grandma and grandpa and mom and dad, and the kids would give us menus, and we could select, and we had prepared foods, and we could make our order. And so that was really a fun part of a holiday time. And then you can do things like go to the store together, get the items you need that you have prepared, or go to the farmer's market. But anyway, these are creative ways of when you're kind of together for a period of time, you have some options. If you're planning to attend something like a potluck event, try to contribute a healthy dish that your kids will eat. And that way, that they're going to get something that's nourishing. And if your friends and family are open to it, like I said, you can request that the potluck theme be relatively healthy. That way, when the chocolate fountain comes out, everyone can enjoy it without being on, it doesn't have to be on top of pizza and candy that they've already had. It can be special. So, yes, remaining courteous and polite is something that we talked about. So if all is possible, maintain that bedtime rhythm. Kim Payne says that bedtimes that vary or are vastly different than what the kids are used to, it has the same physiological effects as jet lag. So any sleep that you or your child can get before midnight is actually worth more than sleep after midnight. And that's because of the deeper somatic sleep happens earlier in the night. So if you can, try to get everybody in bed, earlier than midnight. So I think, those three things I would say are most important about rhythm. And then, of course, if you can, if it's possible, if you're part of any planning events for the family, try to make things earlier in the day rather than later, if that's at all possible. All right, let's move on to the schedule. So we have a lot that we know that can be part of the schedule. And something that I just want you to, you can see this little boy in the first photo. I really want you to take a deep breath and think about boredom. Boredom is actually a gift. And Kim says it's the precursor to creativity. But we are really afraid sometimes of boredom. And, our children become really irritating sometimes, and they think it's our problem to solve their boredom. But you don't want to convince your kids that, that boredom is great. They won't believe you. So just allow for the boredom to sit. And, if you give it a fair shot without trying to fix it, your child actually will discover something to do. And especially if you're not actually trying to solve it, like if you say, why don't you play with this? Well, what about this? They usually will shoot you down. So don't even bother. Like it's just, and you need to become more boring than boredom. Like it's really not your problem. You want them to struggle a little bit. Like this is about inner development. It takes us about 20 minutes, at a minimum to actually figure out what we're going to do if we're bored. So, of course, as adults, we don't really have that option anymore to be bored, but little kids seem to, and we want them to be bored. And we want them to figure it out because it's problem solving. And that's a great problem for them to solve. And we don't want to give screens as an option. And, they're going to be much more creative if screens really aren't part of their world so much. Otherwise, it's really easy to be like, you know what, I'm just gonna have you watch a show. That's our default right now, giving them phones or tablets and TV time. So if we can, we really want to hold back on that because we're seeing less creativity in children who have a lot of access to screens. So they're actually going to start to build a world of their own making when you give them that time. Your child's boredom isn't your failure. That's it. Let go of this being your problem to solve. Saying yes is also, so if you say yes to one thing, it's also a no. And this is an interesting idea. So if you say yes, let's say to attending, we'll take Christmas as an example of lots of activities that are available in the greater community. So if you say yes to attending Meet the Santa with the goats, you might not have the energy to spend the morning in your jammies making cookies with your child and then delivering them to your neighbors. You're done. You went to the goats, you saw Santa, it was fine, you're good. Well, that's a pretty high energy event. And yes, it sounds really cute. But what it does is it takes away from our ability to go back to what this was meant to be. This was meant to be maybe a more nourishing, more memory making, more connecting time. That can be fun, but it also raises the bar. Remember, anything we do in that kind of level raises the bar, and the kids aren't as excited about making cookies in their jammies. They want to go see now, Frozen. They want to go see that ice show. And they don't really want to get up and take a hike and bring hot chocolate and watch the sun sparkle on the lake. They're like, let's go to see Frozen. So we really are kind of depriving ourselves because it's so easy to like buy the tickets or, you know, go to these events that are being created for us to spend money. And they look like connecting times, and they may be, but they are taking away from these other less expensive and more home-based ideas. So rather than looking for big ways to spend money and time and energy on events that are created for you, balancing the schedule and looking at a calm day at home, and then maybe the next day, like, so maybe one day it's calm at home and you're just going to spend the event, quote unquote, of the day is, yeah, you're going to have this slow rise, slow breakfast. You're going to clean up. You're going to stay in your jammies. Y'all are going to make some cookies and put them in really beautiful little boxes. Then you're going to get ready for the day and you're going to drive around and deliver them. And that's like what you're going to do. And then the next day, you're going to maybe do something a little more like what you would think is active. Maybe you're going to take a hike together. And again, if it's cold enough, maybe you're going to bring some hot chocolate that you can sip on a stone and look out on the lake or whatever that you're hiking near. So it's like the key to balance of the schedule is to look at a day and a week with there's active times and there's calm times, and that you're balancing those out. One day you'll be creating your special meal together and you can eat by candlelight. Other day you're doing some baking or whatever. So it's like these in between, even those days, there might be just quiet rest with a fire. And you're just going to say, yeah, today we're going to have our fire and we're all going to read our books. And we're going to do some puzzles. Maybe we'll play a game, like rethinking how you spend time together. And I think at the same time, like, we tend to leave our houses a lot, and then we have like the laundry builds up, or we've got all these dishes to do. And, we need to be thinking, remember those two foundational meaty thighs of your family. It's about how we work together and play together. So we're all going to help clean up. We're all going to help fold the laundry. My expectation is that typically, children by 8 and 9 years old, they can learn to do their own laundry. Like, we shouldn't be looking at that as one person's job. So even during the holidays, thinking about how we balance and how we work together and play together. So filtering is that last realm of our home. And this has to do with how we filter the adult world for our young children. So, when we have kids, sometimes we may forget that we shouldn't be like talking around them about adult things sometimes, or because they pick up everything, or that we have a show on, or we're listening to NPR in the car. Like, all of this actually takes a lot of our energy. So filtering is about thinking about, how do I filter the world a little bit for this young child so it's not so overwhelming. So something like, obviously the big one is screen time. So rather than something kids can just do at their pleasure, especially during a vacation when we would just want to kind of be like, whatever, you can do whatever. But instead of that being the impulse, like really thinking intentionally about screens, and, that we're going to help to keep our children calm, creative, and courteous. We would want to be a little more intentional about media consumption, and really prevent daily negotiation around screens. Something that was just, it really helped in our family. I'm very grateful actually to the Waldorf school, because they set up rules where it was only, the children could not have screens during the school week or on what they would say school nights. And so really from Sunday to Thursday, the kids didn't have access to screens. And when they did have access, it was usually a family activity. We would choose something to watch as a family, and we'd do that. So it didn't become this thing where they could just spend time on, or they didn't have iPads at that time. I don't know what I would do now. I think it's really challenging for parents, because we've just found these things that we think are helping us, but in the end, they're actually creating more anxiety in children and a lot of negotiation, unnecessary negotiation with kids. So kids who have access to screens are having a harder time focusing and finding creative outlets during downtime. They're kids that tend to be a lot more bored, and they can't find things to do very quickly. It takes them a lot longer sometimes than 20 minutes because they're really craving, that screen time when they don't have it. But again, we're going to remind ourselves we don't need to be afraid of boredom. We can do this. We can even limit our own watching, 2 times when the kids aren't either there or after they've gone to bed. So they're not seeing us watching screens when they're little. That's time that when we watch things, they're not around to see that. So we're not modeling that for them. And the other thing that I want to say about filtering, and I mentioned it in the little preview there, was that keeping the planning and the decision making of things that we want to do during the holiday, keeping that between the parents and adults. Young kids don't need to be behind the curtain and see how the sausage is made, so to speak. We can really reduce the amount of choices and decisions for kids around those kinds of decision making, because that actually helps reduce their anxiety, because decision making and choices, there's a lot of unpredictability around that. It can be very disorienting. And of course, this is what we know it can look like, right, when our kids get really overwhelmed. And what we need to know, of course, is if we're being wise, we're going to go into our beautiful calming, this new kind of way of thinking about holidays and holy days, but we still need to expect some disorientation. They're probably not going to be perfect. They're probably going to have some more sugar than normal. They may be going to bed later. We can't control it all. We're keeping it all in mind, and we're trying and striving towards intention. So when you know that it will happen, you can, when you know that, okay, we might see some disorientation, we can roll with it. We're going to roll with it more easily. We're going to validate those emotions. You were really upset. You wanted to see Santa or whatever it was, and you didn't get to. I understand that. You are sad. You're really sad about that. And you see how you can adjust the conditions, right? Because our job is to provide the conditions that help our child to grow, to help our child remain remain oriented. And so when we see that they're falling apart, we gotta think about, okay, how can I adjust the situation? It might be best just to go. You don't need to be brilliant in the moment. A child who is in this state, you cannot work with this child in a logical way. It would be unwise for you to meet. This is a child in their, what we'd call their limbic system, in their brain stem, where they're in a motion state. And we tend to, as parents, think that we're going to be able to somehow use our prefrontal cortex and connect with this child. The joke is on us. That is not the way to go, friends. With a child that's in this state, we can just comfort, and we can also do no harm and strive to figure out how we can alleviate the disorientation. It just might be by getting out of the situation altogether. When we clutter the environment, when our days are too unpredictable, when the schedule's just too much and overwhelms our kids, there aren't any bad children. And even during the holidays, we see a lot of kids crying like this at the mall and everything. They're not bad, obviously. They're overwhelmed. And if we understand that their behavior is communication, we can see that our child's tantrum, or their hitting or throwing, or their defiance, this behavior is out of that disorientation. And we're not going to try to talk them out of it. That would be ridiculous. They're not in a state that would work. Validation is where we want to go. And sometimes just comforting and then moving ourselves to another location will help. Now, something that I think I wanted to close with today is just how we can use these opportunities of extended holiday times and holy days as ways that we can heal what I call and what Kim Payne has coined as soul fever. So beautiful, like the language of that. I'm like, oh, we have soul fever. That's what's happening. You know, holidays offer this opportunity to heal over time and kind of because so much overwhelm can be lingering from just our everyday life, the busyness of the schedule, you know, early school mornings, after school activities, birthday parties, faith community events. So over time, our busy lives build anxiety in us and in our kids. And, you know, little kids express soul fever through teariness and sensitivity, disoriented behavior. Whereas older kids, they actually might be able to give words to their emotional overwhelm, but still need some space and some time to reset and just process with downtime and rest. So we can use these holiday vacations as opportunities to provide time for art and in silence. Like we don't need to fill the space with noise, with constant music or background or anything, just quietness that can fill the space as we do some art together. Nature, of course, storytelling. We've talked about, you know, working on home projects can be supportive, and they help kids and parents work through. All of these things really help us to work through things that are upsetting to us. These can just help us reset. So if we can think about our holiday times, depending on the how long we have, it may just be a day, but remember we can prepare for that day. But as a form of care, um, you know, slowing down actually isn't easy. And it actually sometimes feels strange to implement it because we're so used to filling so much up and doing and doing. It's okay that if we're a little uncomfortable having slower days. And we might be in that moment actually inviting there to be more like squabbles and upset and a release of emotion. Remember, that's part of our healing is to actually be able to express, you know, our upset and kind of getting that out because there hasn't been maybe time or space to do it. There hasn't been a moment for us to let go of our feelings. And if we know that tears and upset are part of, especially young children growing and learning from limits, that's part of their maturation process. It doesn't mean that we let go of the limit because they're crying. Crying is really healthy, and what you can do is rest in knowing that your limits and boundaries are necessary. At the same time, so are your snuggles, because you're the comforter. You're the one who sets the limit, and you're the one who comforts them about the limit. You don't let go of the limit. So, you know, patience and your calm responses. So we can use this really precious time. I want to review with you what we've covered. So we've talked about how holidays can be renewing and joyful and sacred. And, you know, they create family traditions and rituals, and preparation builds anticipation and create the holiday environment with soft lighting and flowers or natural smells. And we can maintain the rhythms through healthy meals and bedtimes and commit to being courteous. Keep the schedule light, include time for boredom, baking, nature, filter the information tsunami by keeping screen time special and planning, you know, kept in the adult world. And use holiday time to heal soul fever. So I just want to thank you so much for joining me today and taking the time to be here or watch the replay. I am so passionate about helping parents integrate simplicity and connection over control into their everyday home lives. So I'm offering all parents the opportunity to schedule a free home life transformation map discovery session with me. And that is basically that, I think every family deserves to have the best tools possible to experience home life at its best, to know how to bring out the best in each other. And I'm seeing that families are really struggling with the amount of clutter, toys, books, clothes, laundry, stuff. And it can be pretty paralyzing to our everyday joy. They're also struggling with the day-to-day routines or the lack of routine and predictability, what we call rhythm. And they're craving some predictability. So they don't feel like every day is a guessing game. Families are really overscheduled. They're not clear about how to pull back. They feel drawn to many activities and they feel a responsibility to entertain their kids. And they lack downtime, and there's a lot of coming and going. Some families are struggling with information overwhelm and they want to limit screen time, but they're not confident about creating limits and boundaries. And they would really love just guidance on how to establish healthier screen limits. So it's out of these four simplifying realms that parents can reduce disorientation and then find more connection with their kids and provide the conditions that their children need to mature as nature intended. So my whole idea is that if I can work with families on their home life transformation maps, I just hope you will take me up on that. And, it's not a sales call. We would work together to create that map with you. And then I'll say, hey, did you want help to implement this map? And that would be, of course, my program. But you can say, yeah, I do, or no, I think I can handle this, on my own. I got the ideas and I'm going to run with it. So it's really just a simple yes or no, but I want to basically do this with every family that I know because I just have seen how powerful it is. And I'm just working with a few clients at a time so I can really focus my energy on those who want the help. Um, and I'm getting so much out of that, you guys. So anybody who's interested, please take me up on it because it really nourishes me, fuels me, and allows me to also see more about what I can do to help parents in certain areas. I talked with a family. I didn't realize like laundry for some families is just like really challenging, like they are overwhelmed. So I'm thinking about, oh, wow, I need to do, a special little mini course just on how to create some systems like a laundry system and when you can expect your child to know how to do their own laundry and things like that. So I learned so much from you. So please take me up on it. And thanks again so much for being here.